continuing with the big story this hour on WeOn, urging Russia and Iran to step aside from Syrian crisis. US President Donald Trump ordered military strikes against the regime of President Bashar al-Assad over suspected chemical attack in eastern Ghouta's Douma town. Trump announced the strikes were conducted in coordination with France and the United Kingdom. Trump said the purpose of the strikes is to establish a strong deterrent against the production, spread and use of chemical weapons. Loud explosions light up skies over Syrian capital Damascus, as you can see on your TV screens. According to US general facilities in Damascus were allegedly storing sarin gas. They are conflicting reports as to how many missiles were fired over Syria. Russia claims 100 missiles were fired, while Syria claimed 30 missiles hit Syria.
A short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. A combined operation with the armed forces of France and the United Kingdom is now underway. We thank them both.
U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis has called the strikes a one-time event and said there are no additional attacks planned.
Strike tonight separately demonstrates international resolve to prevent chemical weapons from being used on anyone under any circumstance in contravention of international law. I want to emphasize that these strikes are directed at the Syrian regime. In conducting these strikes, we have gone to great lengths to avoid civilian and foreign casualties. But it is a time for all civilized nations to urgently unite in ending the Syrian civil war by supporting the United Nations-backed Geneva peace process.
Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Theresa May has also reacted to the airstrikes against Bashar al-Assad's regime.
This evening, I have authorised British armed forces to conduct coordinated and targeted strikes to degrade the Syrian regime's chemical weapons capability and deter their use. We are acting together with our American and French allies. In Douma last Saturday, a chemical weapons attack killed up to 75 people, including young children, in circumstances of pure horror. The fact of this attack should surprise no one.
Australia has also thrown its weight behind the US airstrikes, saying it fully supports the move against Syrian regime's chemical attacks.
The use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, under any circumstances is illegal and reprehensible. The Assad regime cannot be allowed to commit such crimes with impunity. That is why Australia fully supports the US-led strikes against chemical weapons facilities in Syria today. The strike by the United States, France and the United Kingdom forces targeted the Syrian regime's chemical weapons research, development and production capability. Those locations were specifically chosen to minimise the risk to civilians.
All right, and to give us more perspective on this big story, I'm joined in by our Middle East expert, Valle Awad, who's joining us live from Madrid. Mr. Awad, you know, the US airstrikes, according to Donald Trump, have been carried out to set a strong deterrent against the production, spread and use of chemical weapons. Do you agree with this?
Absolutely false, and this is absolute aggressions by the American. How can you attack when there is already an organization from the Prevention of Chemical Weapon Delegation in Damascus and you are attacking at the same time? So what kind of message are you trying to give the international community? You can't be the judge, you can't be also the executor, you can't take retaliation and take unilateral action. So it's just a false flag that they wanted to raise against the Syrian government. It's an American policy, which is a chronology of it shows that from George W. Bush, ever since the invasion of Iraq, they wanted to change the Syrian regime. Obama said the same thing. Trump said the same thing. And he keeps sending conflicting message about his view of Syria, till the deep state in the United States have forced him to go into such kind of aggressions, which is only leading to more instability inside Syria.
Right. Mr. Awad, you've just made a very interesting point over there. To continue with that point, I'd like to point out that, the attack comes on the eve of a planned visit by the OPCW, which is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Now, do you think that, just at the eve of this planned visit by the officials from the OPCW, will these strikes now, not cause any sort of damage at the site of last week's chemical weapon attack in Syria?
No, not at all. The alleged site of the chemical was inside the terrorist organization, which is supported by the White Helmet, which is funded by the MI6 and also by the CIA, inside Syria, inside Al-Ghouta, inside Douma, where this terrorist organization were active. Even we have found there are chemical factories where they were using this kind of chemical, even made in Germany, made in UK, bottles were found there. They know that there is no such kind of an action by the Syrian government. Everybody knows, even the OPCW, that they have already confirmed that the Syrian government have handed over all its chemical weapons and also the infrastructure of these chemical weapons to manufacturer to the United Nations, and they have removed it from Syria with the acknowledgement of the international community. But they were still saying there are remittance of this within the Syrian government. Now, if you are attacking facilities of chemical weapon inside Syria, even if there was a chemical weapon, as you are saying, will it not spread inside Syria and will have impact on the surrounding civilian living in those areas? What kind of things you are trying to convince the world that this is a chemical facilities, these are the places we are attacking, this is a retaliation? This is an eyewash. They wanted to continue the war on Syria. They lost it for 7 years. Now they wanted to make it with a military action. And we all know this. And I think the only people they made happy on the ground is their own peoples, who are their henchmen, who are killing the Syrian people. Inside Douma, inside Ghouta, inside Idlib. These are only the people who are in jubilation and firing on the air. While if you go to inside Damascus right now, people are surrounding and rallying behind the government that they are showing kind of a support. So it is mainly an aggression to remove a government by a policy laid down by the American administration for a regime change, which they have been announcing it off and on from all the American leaders in this region.
Since you just mentioned that, this airstrike in Syria is clearly targeted at a regime change and not to destroy, the chemical weapons infrastructure, then if, the US has actually declared that it is probably the entire operation is over now, then how do you interpret this now that that declaration has arrived that the operation is over and they don't plan to take it ahead?
Well, this is an operation over. They have not said that they can tomorrow also raise another action inside Syria. They can, under other pretexts, they go and attack Syria. Look at the war on Syria ever since it has started. From the day one, they wanted this government to go. They have supported. Look at the cable from the WikiLeaks, which the American administration have been sharing with the inside, which they don't want us as a media person to know publicly. They were saying how to destabilize the region. The charge d'affaires of the American embassy in Damascus was sending message to his bosses in the Pentagon and the CIA. How should we remove this government? How to create a Sunni Shia fight? How to destabilize the Syrian government? Because they don't want this government to be in power. Everybody knows this is the policy being carried out by the American administration. I don't see any surprise for me on this. It's just a continuous aggressions. A proxy war fought in Syria for 7 years. Now it is more aggression, taking more of regional allies and the West into a war open in Syria. You will remember that a week ago or 10 days ago, the American president was ready to move his troops based illegally inside Syria out of Syria. Suddenly he said, if the Saudi pay money, we will stay back. Are we looking for a raw state, or we are renting armies, NATO and the American armies, because a rented army for this kind of an action? What kind of policy you have in the region anyway?
Right. Right, Mr. Awad, I'm going to request you to actually pause over there. We will come back to you. For now, let's quickly go across to the story urging Russia and Iran to step aside from Syrian crisis. US President Donald Trump ordered military strikes against the regime of President Bashar al-Assad over suspected chemical attack in eastern Ghouta's Douma town. Let's listen in to what Trump's announcement had to say.
My fellow Americans, a short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. A combined operation with the armed forces of France and the United Kingdom is now underway. We thank them both. Tonight, I want to speak with you about why we have taken this action. 1 year ago, Assad launched a savage chemical weapons attack against his own innocent people. The United States responded with 58 missile strikes that destroyed 20% of the Syrian Air Force. Last Saturday, the Assad regime again deployed chemical weapons to slaughter innocent civilians, this time in the town of Douma, near the Syrian capital of Damascus. This massacre was a significant escalation in a pattern of chemical weapons use by that very terrible regime. The evil and the despicable attack left mothers and fathers, infants and children thrashing in pain and gasping for air. These are not the actions of a man. They are crimes of a monster instead. Following the horrors of World War I a century ago, civilized nations joined together to ban chemical warfare. Chemical weapons are uniquely dangerous, not only because they inflict gruesome suffering, but because even small amounts can unleash widespread devastation. The purpose of our actions tonight is to establish a strong deterrent against the production, spread, and use of chemical weapons. Establishing this deterrent is a vital national security interest of the United States. The combined American, British, and French response to these atrocities will integrate all instruments of our national power, military, economic, and diplomatic. We are prepared to sustain this response until the Syrian regime stops its use of prohibited chemical agents. I also have a message tonight for the two governments most responsible for supporting, equipping, and financing the criminal Assad regime. To Iran and to Russia, I ask, what kind of a nation wants to be associated with the mass murder of innocent men, women, and children? The nations of the world can be judged by the friends they keep. No nation can succeed in the long run by promoting rogue states, brutal tyrants, and murderous dictators. In 2013, President Putin and his government promised the world that they would guarantee the elimination of Syria's chemical weapons. Assad's recent attack and today's response are the direct result of Russia's failure to keep that promise. Russia must decide if it will continue down this dark path or if it will join with civilized nations as a force for stability and peace. Hopefully, someday we'll get along with Russia and maybe even Iran, but maybe not. I will say this, the United States has a lot to offer. With the greatest and most powerful economy in the history of the world. In Syria, the United States, with but a small force being used to eliminate what is left of ISIS, is doing what is necessary to protect the American people. Over the last year, nearly 100% of the territory, once controlled by the so-called ISIS Caliphate, in Syria and Iraq has been liberated and eliminated. The United States has also rebuilt our friendships across the Middle East. We have asked our partners to take greater responsibility for securing their home region, including contributing large amounts of money for the resources, equipment, and all of the anti-ISIS effort. Increased engagement from our friends, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt, and others, can ensure that Iran does not profit from the eradication of ISIS. America does not seek an indefinite presence in Syria under no circumstances. As other nations step up their contributions, we look forward to the day when we can bring our warriors home, and great warriors they are. Looking around our very troubled world, Americans have no illusions. We cannot purge the world of evil or act everywhere there is tyranny. No amount of American blood or treasure can produce lasting peace and security in the Middle East. It's a troubled place. We will try to make it better, but it is a troubled place. The United States will be a partner and a friend, but the fate of the region lies in the hands of its own people. In the last century, we looked straight into the darkest places of the human soul. We saw the anguish that can be unleashed and the evil that can take hold. By the end of World War I, more than 1 million people had been killed or injured by chemical weapons. We never want to see that ghastly specter return. So today, the nations of Britain, France, and the United States of America have marshaled their righteous power against barbarism and brutality. Tonight I ask all Americans to say a prayer for our noble warriors and our allies as they carry out their missions. We pray that God will bring comfort to those suffering in Syria. We pray that God will guide the whole region toward a future of dignity and of peace. And we pray that God will continue to watch over and bless the United States of America. Thank you and good night. Thank you.
And now let me quickly go across to Dr. Valle Awad, who's our West Asia expert, and he's joining us live on the show. Dr. Awad, we just heard what Donald Trump had to say, also issued a strict warning towards Russia. How do you see, the entire scenario panning out now that Russia has also, it's responded, and it's been a very angry response coming in from Russia. Also, there's been a breaking news coming in that, Hezbollah has responded, and they've said, and they've also, lauded the Syrian air defense for confronting these airstrikes. How do you see the entire scenario now panning out?
Well, I think the United States tried to avoid the attacking the Russian side, and in fact, they have even avoided the detections of their missile system over Syria. But they wanted to be a limited operation. It was a message from the American administration against the Russian. In fact, this administration, Trump administration, now become the worst, have a worse relation with Russia at the moment because of the conflicting between the Pentagon and the White House about the Russian role in the election at one place, and also in Russian role inside Syria and many other places where the United States feel that the Russians are getting the dominance, and the Russians are showing their power now and emerging as a great power along with the Chinese. So there is a proxy war fought over Syria. We all know that they have been fighting, and now it has been in the open by dragging their feet of the French and the British inside the Syrian civil war, and the quagmire of this war is a clearly indication that they are looking for more battle zones in the region.
Right. Dr. Awad, also interestingly, Russia just a few days ago had said that it will down U.S. missiles and also the sources from where they were fired. So how do you see, do you think that Russia will choose to escalate this further?
Well, I think the American tried to de-escalate it. In fact, when the Russian gave these warnings, we have seen the kind of candid relation and indoor between the Russian representative and the American representative inside the closed-door discussion in the United Nations. And I think that was the message that, look, we are not going to attack your personnel, remove them from this side, remove them from this side. We have already chosen our target. And all this kind of coordination between the two superpowers. But I think at the end of the day, the American realized that it is not the Iranian whom they are worried about. It's not it's the Russian, it is the Chinese. And we all know this, that they wanted to remove the Russian from the Mediterranean water, and their only sole food is inside Syria. So therefore, it is a policy to remove a regime change and also to remove Russia and encroach more into the Russian for more isolation from Europe.
All right. And you mentioned how the Chinese are proving to be an equally big threat to the US. Let's talk about the fence-sitters, as far as China and India are concerned. How do you see their role?
Well, I think they have stuck to the adherence of the UN Charter. In fact, non-intervention, no military action against any government, no forcible regime. Let the people of the country decide. I think this policy with the BRICS will continue for some time, and it will continue because we need, in a multipolar world, we need to see emergence of India voices in the international arena. We need to see also the Chinese and the Russian to counter this kind of aggression where country unilaterally can go and change regime. Look, I was in Iraq. It is the 15th year of the attack on Iraq, the invasion of Iraq. We know that who brought the Iranian influence inside Iraq. We knew that who brought the Iranian into influence inside Syria. And we know that they are expanding these places to wanted to continue with the confrontation. If you're having somebody who is paying your bill, I'm sure the 100 missiles poured inside Syria have been paid by the Saudis in advance. So what kind of international law are you protecting currently with this kind of regimes? A global power that they are looking at it from the money wise. Imagine that somebody come and pay you money to fire at the country. Look what's happening in Yemen. They are with the blessing of the Americans with cluster bombs where they are not even stopping the Saudi-led coalition from firing at it. So are you trying to really bring peace and security, stabilize the world, the global peace and security, or you are destabilizing the world by creating more fighting inside this world?
Absolutely. On a last note, Dr. Awad, I would like to, request you to actually analyze US and its allies. Apart from its allies, Canada, Australia and Turkey have also voiced their support now. Turkey, another very key player, had been, playing a very, very shrewd game so far. And the latest reports have just come out and it's actively voiced its support for the US. How do you see Turkey now playing this role?
Well, we know the mess is created by the Pakistan in the making for Syria, which was the Turkey, the de facto Khalifa. Erdogan himself, he have opened the border for infrastructure for all these militant. The former prime minister of Qatar, Hamad bin Jassim, he himself said that we paid $137 billion to infrastructure through the training of the terrorists inside Syria. We have sent mercenaries from all over to destabilize the regime on the behest of the Americans. So I think the Muslim Brotherhood organization, which has its root and its heartfelt within the side of Erdogan, he is trying to bring the image of the Ottoman Empire back in the ground, on the air, that this part of the world is under the hegemony, under the influence of Turkey. And that's why he's been used actually by the American and by the NATO. He is a NATO ally, he is a NATO member. He is using all these military bases there. He is occupying part of Syria. He is killing the Syrian people, expelling them from their homes and villages inside Syria. And he is opening also his eyes on the Iraqi part. So it's just a matter of widening the conflict, trying to disintegrate this part of the world. And I'm sure this ramification and it will backfire on him in the near future, because the heterogeneous society of the Turkish government, the Turkish people knows that this country is heading for more trouble and more disintegration once the American finish using them.
Right. Very interesting point made by you, Dr. Awad, over there, that this could just be about widening the conflict. Thank you so much, Dr. Valle Awad, for joining us here live on WeOn. And it's time to wrap this news edition. But before I wrap this news broadcast, let's listen into what locals from Washington, D.C. have to say about the U.S. action on Syria.
It's my opinion that violence is never the answer to anything. War is never the answer. Shooting, dropping bombs is never the answer. Imagine if someone dropped a bomb right here in Times Square right now. Does that seem like that's the right answer? No, it's not. And the fact that people think it's okay to kill other people just boggles my mind. I think there is always a diplomatic solution.
I don't agree with missile attacks, but I don't agree with the chemical warfare either. I think out of the two, the chemical warfare is the one that called onto the missile attacks. I don't agree with that. I think it's harmful to people. But I really do hope that we don't get too far into a hole that we lose ourselves as a nation and what we stand for.